Welcome to the Payments Trilogue, where three seasoned professionals discuss payments and more for Europe and beyond.
Hello, my name is Michael Salmony, and Javier and Ralph and I want to explore today the topic of cross-border, especially cross-border instant. I mean, instant is appearing all over the world, but they're not really connected yet. And of course, what we need at some stage is for everybody to be able to send money to everybody instantly. That happens within Europe, but not so much cross-border. And there's several initiatives on that. The G20, as we may have heard, is struggling a little bit. It's been working on that for years. Stablecoins are now coming up to say they solve that. Some people say CBDCs, wholesale CBDCs do that, some BIS projects. There are lots of things going on to address that. But maybe we can start with you, Javier, because during your regency at the EPC, you created OLO, which I think is something that goes in that direction. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Well, yes, OLO was one of the last schemes developed by the EPC, the European Payments Council, and to me it brings kind of a paradoxical lesson, because to me, even if it's now just a green shoot and it's in its early stages, I think of it as a sign of maturity of SEPA. So one, you have created a true single market, which still is not the case, but we are getting closer to that. Then you realize that for that really to mature, to be solid, you need to dissolve the walls. And one of the walls is that of Europe. So you need to make that area permeable to the rest of the world. And this is what OLO brings onto the table, which is the way to get out and to get into SEPA in an efficient manner, using the same...
Hang on, I have to interrupt you, because I had, one of our listeners was complaining that we are using these acronyms and we're not explaining them. So tell us, what do you mean by OLO?
OLO is one leg out, and in fact, the scheme is called one leg out credit transfer. So it's a scheme to make possible transactions going outside SEPA, single euro payments area, and getting into SEPA. So it's the way to make the area permeable to the rest of the world in both ways, getting out and getting into the area. That's OLO, one leg out. One leg out is, it's a jargon, and I think this listener is very right in complaining, because I personally also hate acronyms. But anyhow, these one leg out transactions, they make that area permeable. So and in that sense, it's counterintuitive, because for one jurisdiction, from one currency area to be mature, it has also to have connections to the rest of the world. So that's why I think this is important, because it shows that we are moving in the right direction. So once SEPA has matured, yes, there is a need to have links and to have transactions with the rest of the world. And I think that's the way. So instead of trying to push the current world as it is, trying to do it faster, more accessible, cheaper even, what we should expect is that in the different jurisdictions, we reach that stage of having instant payments, and then the next phase would be to connect those areas. That's to me the sensible way, not trying to push current things as they are now, trying to improve them, enhance things that are currently in place, but thinking that what we have to do is to move to real time, really 24/7, and then think how to connect those areas. And this is the second lesson I get from OLO. OLO is not only a means to make SEPA permeable, but it is also a necessary brick to build pan-European solutions. Because in Europe, we do have the euro jurisdiction, but do we have many other currencies? And we need to start thinking of how these currencies will work in 10 years or so, when we do really have pan-European solutions at POI and POS. In that case, we will need something to move from one European currency to another European currency. So OLO has not only this dimension of talking to the rest of the world, it's also a necessary step to really think of truly pan-European solutions, thinking of all the currencies in place in Europe. And that's also what I think the most immediate fruit of the OLO, that it will make Europe really much more efficient if it's well done. Of course, we are in the early stages, so it still has not been adopted massively. I think that would be the first aim, to think of mass adoption by PSPs around Europe. And then we will be able to think how this works with the outside world and how it works really to design pan-European solutions.
Very good. Just to understand, OLO is in Europe because SEPA only covers the euro area, so it's to tie in the non-euro European countries, but also to connect to Brazil and to China and India.
So yeah, that is true. It's we tend to think of cross-border because that's the mindset, but really it's about cross jurisdictions. So it's about cross currency. What really matters is going from one currency area to another currency area. That's probably more accurate to reflect the reality. But we talk about cross-border because we still have this 19th century mind. But nevertheless,
it shouldn't in Europe, exactly. Yeah. But why is it not being adopted? I think it's been out for about 2 years. What's the problem?
Well, I think it's a question of priorities. It is starting to be adopted in Spain. It has been adopted by most banks. So now Spain is kind of an island, and there have been the first commercial solutions. And there are some transactions coming from Mexico to Spain and being distributed instantly. So I think that's also where we should focus on. We should aim to instant directly, not think of the old world. And so that has already been adopted in Spain. And I think it will also be the case in other domestic markets in Europe. And eventually it will come to the whole continent. It should be helped if needed, because I think it will be good for everybody. Of course, again, we face the problem of adoption of chicken and egg and the necessary critical mass. And that's one of the problems. The other problems to connect to the rest of the world is that you need reciprocity, and that's the big word, because if you want to connect one area to the other, both needs to stand on the same terms, and for that you need kind of a reciprocity in between those two jurisdictions. But in Europe we already have that, so it would be just a question of really nudging the colleagues to adhere to the scheme and make it something general, if not mandatory, something similar, or that all PSPs in Europe realize that they have to make that move.
So maybe you can take us through some of the other things that are happening in the world.
Well, I want to. Sorry, I first want to dig a bit deeper here, because I have also maybe on the take up. I mean, I am aware that EBA clearing has an implementation of it as part of RT1, so for the INST version, I think. Is there, and that's more basically a year already, and we just had the 2025 OCD INST rulebook going live or being published, so is there anything new coming? Well, I think it's also related to the ISO 20022 switch. I don't know, is there a bit more you can say about actual implementations and CSMs using it, offering it?
Just to add to that, just because Spain, IBAPay and EBA have implemented it, it doesn't mean it's being used. Can you sort of differentiate
exactly
as well?
I think I don't think there is a real traffic at EBA cleared. There is some traffic, still marginal at IBAPay, so it's in production, so it's really commercial transactions, but it's not too big yet. I think, and I was speaking before of priorities, once we had gone through this instant payments regulation, adoption and VOP and all that, I think now PSPs will want to focus on the next steps. And I hope that by 2026, OLO and this OCT, the one leg out credit transfer, will be one of the goals to be achieved in, if not in 2026, aiming to have it really in place, adopted, and in production, really processing transactions in 2027.
And
That's my hope. Of course, I think not only Iberpay, many other CSMs, clearing and settlement mechanisms, as well as EBA clearing, they are prepared. So it's not a question of infrastructure. And in fact, developing OLO is not a big work. It's really simplistic, because it's just adding some fields of information and flagging those transactions. So it's not a big change in the processing. It's just signaling what transactions are coming out or are going out or coming into. So it's I think it's not costly to develop it internally in each PSP, but we need a general move. We need the agreement that we all move together.
And is it is the non-instant OLO actually used, or is everyone leapfrogging right to OCT Inst?
I think in Europe, I think we are all aiming to instant directly, because it makes all the sense. So it's, of course, once you do instant, you have to also to bring up the traditional transactions, but that would, I think that's the consequence. I think people are really aiming to implement in instant.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Should we return to try and broadening the horizon, Ralph? Why don't you?
Yeah. Well, because you already mentioned G20, and of course it's been. I guess the one party that everyone knows around the world on cross-border payments is SWIFT, and so they have addressed the G20 requirements there with what's called Global Payments Innovation (GPI), which is a cross-border, I guess, messaging system that is working faster, or shall work faster, is more trackable, more transparent, and everything. So it is whoever is using it, I think most of it, they claim it's done, most of the payments are done within an hour. I think some say 30 minutes, but in any case, within 24 hours. So I think that's sort of the maximum allowed. And it allows tracking. There is an identifier for it, GPI tracker, UETR, talking about acronyms, whatever that stands for. But it is also about the ISO 20022, I think, use of, and I guess in particular with the address thing. And we have there this, we have been now in a transition period between the old MT messaging standards of SWIFT, and now, coming to the new world, ISO 20022, and deadline being now November 25. Do you know about how that is going? Do you have any insights on SWIFT, on that GPI?
I don't have any particular information. I think they are moving not as quickly as everybody would expect or hope, but I think they are progressing step by step, but not too fast.
I mean, what I'm hearing is that the transfer, the message, of course, is relayed very quickly. That's not the problem. The receiving bank is the problem. Exactly. You can send it to the Philippines immediately, but to get the Philippine bank, sorry to pick on the Philippines here, it could be anybody, takes sometimes days to sort of do the compliance and the AML and the sanction checking and to book it onto the account. And that's the problem. You've got to get all the receiving banks on board. And on the ISO 20022, I mean, at the moment, I get the impression this is still very much a compliance and a standardization exercise. And what I'm really hoping is now that we get end-to-end data transfer, you don't lose data when it goes through several hops from one country to another. And therefore, you can do completely new business models. But I think we're still a little bit off there.
Yeah, but is the I always hear this relating to the address fields and having a structured address rather than a free flow text or free text field there, which would make a big difference. And there has been so much going on also inside the EPC around that subject. I don't know, can you shed a bit of light onto that?
Well, yeah, but that's one of the good examples that it's easier to say than to implement, because as you are saying, the address should be structured for the ease of every processing, but that can be done very easily at scheme level. But then you have to adapt all databases, and this applies not only to PSPs, it applies to end users, particularly to businesses. They would have to modify, to adapt their databases of the addresses they hold for their customers or their partners or whatever. So, and that's the real pain. It's not that you decide that at the scheme level, that would be an easy decision. It's how that goes down to end users, and they adopt that, and then they, instead of using these fields, these heterogeneous fields, they get those structured ones. And that's really where things get difficult. It's moving not thousands of PSPs, but millions and millions of end customers.
Right, and so there have been delays, right? So we've
that will. I think that will take time, and it will not be an easy task. What one would think is that all people are in agreement. So that's also something that everybody has accepted has to be done. So there is the will, there is the idea that it should be done. And then we will need time for that to realize. But there is no obstacle, there is no conceptual difficulty in doing that. It's that probably these businesses and end users need time to adapt. But it will be done. Eventually it will be done, because there is no force against it. There is no disagreement that it needs to be done.
Right, but I guess it's one of the problems of like the old rails or that are getting upgraded into more structural forms, so that the data can be transmitted end to end, that I can use not just but that you basically can get the value add out of the data that goes around the message or comes with a message, with the payment, and which of course is the new kids on the block don't have that legacy, and but then I'm not sure, because if how that would relate like to stablecoin. So because there again, you also would have to have some identification. Once you have identification, you have names and address, and you have all this data. So I think they can then just profit from all this upgrade that has happened here over the years.
I think you're touching the real crucial point, which is that of course even moving funds is not a difficult task. So you can move funds, and PSPs have been criticized for not being able to move funds as fast as telcos were able to move information. That can be done. What is less easy to do is to comply with know your customer requirements, with AML, with sanctions, with all information required at every single point in the whole world, with local regulations. So that's the real difficulty. It's not moving funds. That can be done, and I think, and Michael was referring to it, that can be done quite easily. Is that then you have to comply with all information requirements having to do with many aspects, and that's where things come much more difficult. It's like criticizing the telecom industry, not because they are not fast enough in moving messages, but when they arrive to the end location, they need to prove it's not a fake news. That's not as easy as moving information. Proving that it's true and that there is no fraud in it, in that information or that news being moved from one point to the other, that's the trick. And I think in that sense, moving funds is more or less the same. Moving funds itself is not that difficult. I wouldn't say it's easily done, but you can do it. It's something accessible. But proving all the rest of conditions is what really is much more demanding.
Yeah, the other noticeable project in this area, and I found quite remarkable, is this from the BIS Bank of International Settlements, like worldwide settlement bank. They came up with this project called Nexus, where the idea is to have all these instant payment solutions that are now coming up in all the countries or regions. And of course, we just gone live here in Europe with our instant payments becoming the new normal, and the imposing it for receiving and sending instant payments now across all banks in Europe, Euro banks for now, but the non-Euro banks coming too. Anyway, so we have this instant payments in Europe, and then there is instant payments in other countries, many countries. Famously, we know about India and Brazil, big ones there, but elsewhere too. So we have almost, I don't know how many, but it's probably dozens or if not hundreds are already. And the idea is to connect all these national or regional instant payment systems into through a hub, so that each one does not need a bilateral connection with every other one, where we would have all these just too many connections. So here when you go through a hub and spoke model, everyone has only one partner, and so that one partner is supposed to be the base project, or actually they have created a commercial entity, I guess. I think it's called Nexus Global Payments, based in Singapore, and I think that's also where the project is sort of located. And by the way, so the initial participants are countries from that region. So it is Malaysia, have it here, Thailand, Singapore, Philippines, India, or Indonesia, or both. Or anyway, so players from that region which are trialing it, and their ambition is to have this working in less than 60 seconds. So now we're not talking, we're talking minute, 1 minute. We're not talking many minutes. We're not talking 1 hour, or we're not talking 1 day. We're talking, reasonably quick international transfer. And so I hope that, and sorry, one more thing maybe about that. Of course, it is quite tricky to get these connected, because they're, of course, each work differently. So from that hubbing functionality, what is needed is a mapping between those different functionalities. And I think the way it's they've approached this, I can't, it's too detailed now, but I think it's done in a quite clever way that allows this, that basically gives the flexibility and freedom for each solution to have their own, implementate their own way of doing, and they're not required to have to then interconnect with each other one in using another different technology, but they all have to just respect the connection with one different technology, which is the one of Nexus. So each one, there is this hubbing, and therefore mapping only once. And I guess the same may go for then in the operational side for currency, FX, etc. So I think it is a pretty neat model, and if that works out, why do we need any regional interconnections if we have a worldwide one?
I mean, I agree with a lot of what you say, but just to add a couple of things on the BIS. I mean, the BIS is the central bank of central banks, right? It sits above all the central banks. So it's by its definition, it is always looking at cross-border and global interconnect. So my perception is that there are plenty of projects going on at BIS which aim to create global instant. Nexus seems to have the best PR department. They seem to get the most attention. But there are a few others like Enbridge, which is connecting various CBDCs around the world. There's Mariana. There's Ralph, that's right up your street, Agora, which is using open banking to try and connect trade across the world. So there are actually, I think, over 20 projects at the BIS, which most of them focus around interconnecting. So that's really, really great. I'm slightly dubious about this hub and spoke model, quite honestly. I mean, obviously, it solves the end-to-end problem. If you don't need to connect everybody to everybody, but having a hub, having a central instance has a lot of problems about sort of resilience, about a single point of failure. So I'm quite a fan of these more distributed models, and I won't say stable coins again because I'm beginning to get told off for this. But I think there are more modern ways of maybe connecting the world than that. But this is surely one of the interesting ones to watch, absolutely. Yeah.
But I think we can derive two lessons from all these projects. One is that the more standardized the setting, the better. So it's you need really to make things compatible. And the more compatible, the better. So, and I would say, look for simplicity because that's the best way to get the same standards. That's one thing I would focus on. And the second one is that we need to focus on those areas and corridors that really make sense. Trying to enhance the whole world just at once, I think it's too much. And we should be spotting where the opportunities arise and really try to address them. And create something meaningful where there is critical mass or there is a commercial interest or there is something to be gained from the effort that it takes to move a region or a corridor. That I think is the second lesson, because when I look into this G20 roadmap, I get a little bit upset because it's, of course, they published a report last week saying that they will not achieve the goals that were set by 2027. And that they are running late and some things are lagging behind, etc. And when you look into the actions, one would say, yes, of course. It was all about setting frameworks, giving recommendations, creating a task force. That's not a strategy. And I think they have confused a strategy with setting strategic goals. And there were very precise goals in terms of speed, cost, accessibility, and transparency. Those were really strategic goals, but setting goals is not designing a strategy. It's like, of course, in the example I put always is chess. In chess, it is very easy to learn the strategy. Is capturing the opposite king. That's all. The problem in chess is how to do that. How can you get the adversary's king? And it's a way how to do it. It's not the goal, it's on how to do it. And by creating frameworks and proposing task forces and recommendations, I think things are not done as we all expect. So, and the problem with this analysis and this report is that it acknowledges that they will not get where they wanted to be, but they really don't identify the causes of that mishap. So it's not that they say, well, we were mistaken in doing this or that. Nobody knows why goals are not being achieved, but it is a fact that they will not be achieved. So I think they should be more critical with themselves in how the whole strategy and the whole project was set up.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, today we don't have a guest, so we can argue amongst ourselves. This is really fun. So I'm going to disagree a little bit with you, Javier, if I may, because I think G20 have just bitten off more than they can chew. They are trying to solve the whole global problem of how to make instant payments throughout the world from a commercial point of view, from a legal point of view, from fraud, etc., which means they've created this enormous effort with 17 different strands, each with 17 different task forces and everything. So I think they are trying to address the problems, but the problem is just incredibly hard. And just maybe, tweaking around the edges of a system that's been built over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years and trying to make that interconnect and work. And even though the legal system in the Philippines, to stay with that, may be super different to what we have in Europe, trying to get all that in one harmonized thing maybe is actually an impossible task. That is why, again, you need to go a different way. You need to break the molds and do it a different way. That's what I think the G20 have put a valiant effort in, but the task is just too hard.
Yeah, but I would say that I agree with you. So I would say you are much more politically correct in addressing the.
So what else do we want to talk about?
Could I circle this back to Europe and to OLO? Because as far as I understand it, so if I look at these 3 or let's say 4 ways, so we have instant payments in Europe. We have one leg out for Europe between currencies and beyond Europe. Then we have SWIFT GPI. And we have Nexus, and I guess there are obviously other stablecoins, completely different ways of doing, and possibly or many other ways of doing cross-border as well. But just looking at those, say the 3 that we mainly looked at here, so I can see how SWIFT and OLO fit together, and if I understand it correctly, so if someone, I don't know, sends money from I don't know, US or somewhere, and it uses SWIFT GPI, then it arrives in Europe at some point, at some bank, some correspondence bank, and then it sort of switches over to OLO or OLO Inst or OCT Inst, and then it is so we have like the increased speed and tracking on the international leg. And then we have SET Inst in Europe within 10 seconds. So therefore, I think those 2 are like complementary. But if I now look at Nexus, and that's why I meant earlier, it is sort of like an international solution of what OLO tries to do as well for Europe, but also beyond. So if I'm connected to Nexus, then the money goes from, the US to Singapore, or the message there to the hub, and then from the hub it goes straight into SET Inst or whoever, or RT1 or whatever the implementation of the real time or the instant payments is in Europe, and it bypasses OLO. Is that right, or am I overlooking something?
Well, I think that how it works is that you have entry and exit points. For instance, in SEPA, you have an entry point, which is a PSP able to have a connection to the outside world, whatever corridor or area or region. And when the transaction comes to Europe, it is distributed in instant. So it uses the SET Inst infrastructure with this transaction being flagged as coming from the outside. But you are using the SET infrastructure to the last mile distribution in Europe, or the first mile if you are going out. And I think that's a smart use of the infrastructure that has been developed, because for that last mile or first mile, you are using what you have in place, and you expect that at the other end, you will have the same conditions. So moving the funds is not a something difficult. You can use SWIFT or whatever other means, but then when you come to the destination, you need also that arrangement that you can hit the instant payments system there, and it will be distributed in question of seconds. And the way it goes from one jurisdiction to the other, I think there can be many ways. But the fact is you need to put together to connect those 2 pieces of those 2 instant payment systems so that the first mile and the last mile are really instant.
Okay. Very good. I think we're gradually getting towards the end of our time, unless you have another surprising solution of how we do cross-border instant, which we haven't covered yet. But I think we had a good geek out on that topic. The only other thing I can think of now, I mean, I have a bit of an academic background, and you always should end up with a research paper saying further research. And one further research on this topic is the fintechs. I mean, they are building, what Javier mentioned, individual corridors. I was working with a fintech recently who built a corridor between London and Nigeria, because there's actually a very intensive relationship there. And that's one that's dedicated to only that one corridor. So that's another element which will probably lead to more fragmentation, but yet another one of these initiatives. So the field is rich, and I think we've done a fair stab of doing a first pass over it. So Ralph, Javier, thank you very much for the lovely exchange. Glad we had a bit of a difference of opinion occasionally. I think that's always more fun, also for the audience. And I hope everybody who watched this enjoyed it. And please like and support and repost and tell us in the comments anything you would like to hear in the future or anything you want to note. Okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
You, Ralph and Xavier.
Many thanks for watching and listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Looking forward to seeing you again next time.